Professor Goodwin, let me begin with you. Of course, the Pope is famously consistent on what could be termed a pro-life position. In that he does oppose all uses of the death penalty. He opposes abortion, but does not think it is the number one issue that should be approached in a harsh enforcement style, the way these people do. But most people involved in the American pro-life movement are not just fully in favor of the death penalty, but many of them, we're discovering now in South Carolina, specifically want to use the death penalty on women who might want to end their pregnancies.
Well, your point, Lawrence, about nomenclature, lexicon mattering is important. This is an anti-abortion movement. This is not a pro-life movement. And it's not only in South Carolina, certainly they're saying the quiet part out loud with the number of Republican lawmakers that have signed on to this legislation that would lead to the death penalty against women who want to terminate their pregnancies. But we've also seen in Arkansas, in Kentucky, and Louisiana that there are lawmakers that are proposing the same. In fact, some years ago, and I wrote about this, in Georgia, the lawmaker who pushed forward the bill for embryo adoption after it was enacted said, well, now what this allows for is for embryos to have the same constitutional rights as pregnant women. And so what we see with this is a disregard for the life, the health, the safety, the personhood of women writ large in these states.
Professor Ziegler, we seem to be entering a new stage of more and more extreme, I would definitely entering a new stage of more and more extreme laws being proposed by this group after they have succeeded in getting the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rising group of self-proclaimed, they call themselves abolitionists within the anti-abortion movement who argue that the only way to guarantee equal rights for this fetal person is to punish pregnant women and other pregnant people as harshly as you would punish anyone else for murder. And this is kind of an ascendant faction within the movement. So this is a threat, I think, that you have to take seriously, both on its face, but also because it shifts the Overton window and it makes it seem more normal for Republicans who are not yet ready to embrace the idea of something like executing women for abortion to adopt even more sweeping punishments themselves, right? So one way or another, we're moving toward extremes, and what appears to be normal for the Republican Party is changing pretty rapidly.
Professor Goodwin, when you talk about policing the womb, as you have in your book, where does this fit in the history of it?
Well, Lawrence, there is a very long history with it. And let me just say, building off of what Professor Ziegler has mentioned, Roe v. Wade was a 7-2 opinion. 5 of those 7 justices were Republican appointed. So this just shows the extreme to which this new faction will go. But this policing, Lawrence, goes way back to American colonialism, to American slavery, the policing of Black women's reproduction in horrific kinds of ways. Black women specifically being used for breeding. You can find thousands of advertisements that advertise either for the return of the breeding wench that escaped or to sell them. But we also see this kind of turn at the turn of the 20th century with American eugenics, where poor white people were targeted for coercive sterilization. That too is a part of a policing. Who are the people that are deemed worthy enough to be able to reproduce in the United States? And then who are the people that should be forced into reproduction? And we've seen this twist about throughout the history of the United States, and now in these glaring and horrific and cruel ways, less than a year after the Supreme Court issued its ruling in Dobbs.
Professor Ziegler, you've traced how the Republican Party, as Professor Goodwin just said, back at the Roe versus Wade stage, was not in this rabid anti-abortion position that they're in now. And certainly the establishment of the Republican Party wasn't. We're seeing something interesting in South Carolina with this bill, which is the number of co-sponsors went up over 20, and then it started dropping. They started having second thoughts, and they started withdrawing their names as co-sponsors after they spent a day co-sponsoring the death penalty for pregnant women. And so we're seeing this bill, as it sits there in South Carolina, test each individual Republican legislator about exactly how they feel about the death penalty for women. But of course, all of them remain completely united in their opposition to any use of abortion services.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a testament, I think, to the conflict facing both the anti-abortion movement and the Republican Party. There's a divide right now in the anti-abortion movement about how much to punish women. There's a divide within the Republican Party, as we know, after the 2022 midterm, which was sort of disastrous for the GOP on abortion, about how much to embrace these extreme positions on abortion when they poll badly, especially among Gen Z voters, but just generally. And I think you see that with these kinds of bills. But I think the important point is whether or not this bill passes soon, which I don't think it will, we're going to see more and more of this in the years to come, and it's going to be more and more normalized to call for the punishment of women. And so I think now is the time to sound the alarm. Now is the time to take this seriously before these bills are actually passing, rather than when it's too late.